Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I am doing my labor and delivery story. As you know, if you follow me on social media, I had a little girl on August 10th. And I am so excited to finally sit down and film for you guys. I've been missing YouTube like crazy, and I actually feel really good this time around. My recovery for my second pregnancy has gone so well. I couldn't have asked for a better recovery. As for my labor and delivery, it was quite intense. My labor this time was completely different than with Alex. I encourage you all to watch my last labor and delivery story if you haven't seen that already with Alex, if you want to know kind of how that went. But it was completely different from the one that I'm about to share with you this time. This time, my active labor was just over an hour. Yeah, it went really quick this time. I was taken off guard. Basically, my entire birth plan was thrown out the window, just like it was with Alex. I had a birth plan for both my pregnancies, but nothing went to plan. Alex, I had 11-hour active labor. I had severe back labor. I wanted to do it natural, but ended up getting an epidural. So it was basically complete opposite of this labor and delivery. I had a few complications with Alex. This time it went pretty smoothly. Well, relatively smoothly considering the time frame that I delivered in. But if you guys want to know what happened on the night to the day of my delivery, then just keep watching. As I said, I was not anticipating delivering so fast. I didn't even speak a word of this on my social media as to how my labor went this time. So this is the first time I'm sharing any detail about my labor and delivery. On August 9th, I was just watching TV at night with my husband and my son. It was about 8:30. We were getting Alex ready for bed. My husband was going to have to go back to work the next morning because he was on 2 weeks holidays and he would have had to go back to work on Ariana's due date, which was August 10th. And that happened to be the day I delivered her. So she was delivered on her due date, which is crazy. Alex was delivered the day after his due date, but I did go into labor on his due date. So I'm pretty on time. I gained the same amount of weight. So I had quite similar pregnancies, but quite different labors. So on August 9th, I started having contractions at 8:30 p.m. I hadn't had really anything leading up to that point. I did have some mild contractions the whole day after my 39-week OB appointment when I had a sweep performed. And I thought for sure I was going to go into labor that night, but everything stopped at around 8:30 that night. I wasn't thinking too much of it, but the contractions were getting regular, a little bit more intense this time around. So I'm like, I think this is it. I told my husband I didn't think he'd have to go into work the next day, but I did tell him that maybe he should get some rest. So he did try and sleep while I was in my early stages of labor. Around midnight, I'd say, it was when I'm like, I think I need to call my mom to come up. And my dad happened to be picking my brother up from the airport at that point. He was coming back from San Francisco. I messaged him saying that when he gets home, if he could let mom know that I think that she's going to need to come. I just wanted her to get as much sleep as she could, but he ended up calling her, so she was awake. And by the time he got home, they decided that she was going to drive up herself. My dad was going to drive her, but she ended up driving up herself. So she got there around 2 o'clock, 2:30, I'd say. And we sat down for a bit and talked, and then we went for a little walk outside. So we weren't walking too far from home. We were just walking up and down the street. I was getting contractions every 2 minutes when I was walking. When I was sitting, I was getting them every 5 minutes, and then when I would lay down, I would get them every 7 minutes. So I wanted to keep moving, or at least sitting, because I wanted my contractions to get at least 5 or less. Between 3 and 5, I wanted my contractions to be around before I went to the hospital. So after our walk, we went inside. I figured I probably should contact Charles' mom at this point, just because it was getting a little bit more intense. I also wanted her to sleep as long as she could because we were having her come up to watch Alex while we went to the hospital. My mom was one of my support persons, so I wanted her to be there when I was delivering. So Charles didn't really sleep too well. We ended up calling his mom, I think around 3:30. Once Charles' mom came, I just felt really comfortable that Alex could stay sleeping, someone was there for him. We could leave at any point we wanted if it got intense. Labor and delivery told me to come if my water broke or if I saw any kind of blood, anything like that, to come in. So once his mom got there, my mom and I went on another little walk together, and this time when I came back, I went to the washroom and I noticed some blood. The whole course of the week I was passing my mucus plug. This time was so much, plus I was having my bloody show. I was bleeding a little bit after my sweep, but nothing quite like this. So I did start to bleed. I knew things were progressing. I knew for sure I was in labor at this point. So we waited it out a little bit more, and at about 7 o'clock we decided to go to the hospital. We got checked into the hospital, got our wristbands, all that stuff. Wristbands sound like we're going to a concert. We got our hospital bands. We went to the early labor lounge just to get set up, get monitored, because they like to make sure your contractions are regular, that you are 4 centimeters or more to get admitted into your room. So we went up there, we got hooked up to the monitors. I was having regular contractions. I was 4 centimeters when they checked me. My OB happened to be on call that night, so it was really nice because I was excited that he was going to be able to deliver Ariana, which he never ended up being there for, but I'll get to that. So my OB did come in. I think he got there around 8:30. I think it was around 8:30 that he broke my water. So I had him break my water because they did decide that my contractions were regular. I was 4 centimeters. I was in active labor at this point, but they wanted to speed things up a bit. So he said that my contractions were going to get a little bit more intense, that things were going to happen a little bit faster after my water broke. And we didn't realize how fast things would happen. So this is when it gets a little bit crazy. So he did break my water. He left. I think he had a surgery to go to. At 9 o'clock, I told the nurse, I want the epidural this time. It's getting pretty intense. I know this is what I want this time because I was scared of the back labor, but I wasn't having any back labor. I didn't have any back labor this time. It was just getting really intense, and I didn't realize how far along I was and how quickly things were progressing because I pretty much wanted the epidural right away, and I didn't think that was going to happen. So I asked Charles to ask them if my room was ready because they were getting it ready. At approximately 9 o'clock, it might have been a little bit after, they had me get into a wheelchair. I had one really bad contraction, told them to wait before I sat down in it, and got wheeled out into the hall and to my room. So I waited that out. It was pretty bad. I couldn't even sit down properly in the wheelchair. I was just kind of sitting off to the side like this and just having Charles push me to the room. I couldn't sit flat down. I honestly felt like I was going to give birth in the early labor lounge, but I thought it was just in my mind. But I was pretty close. I got wheeled to my room, sat in my bed. They didn't have time to hook up any monitors. I was having contractions very often. They told me to tell them if I had the feeling I needed to poop, because pretty much that is when you're going to be pushing. And I felt a slight pressure at that point, but I'm like, I can't be ready to push. So I was laboring in my bed. They were really intense, but I was able to handle my contractions. I was asking for the epidural. I'm like, did you put me down for the epidural? I really, really want it this time. It's getting pretty intense. And they told me that they had to get blood work first. So I was waiting for the person to come up for blood work. It's pretty much, I was about to give birth while they were taking my blood and while they were trying to get an IV in me. So I didn't realize I was in the process of transitioning, which is the worst part of labor, when they were taking my blood and when they were trying to get an IV in. So I still have some marks from where they were getting my IV in. Like, I was bruised really bad. They poked me probably about 7 times. They couldn't get an IV in. Needles don't bother me whatsoever, so I didn't care. Also, I didn't care at this point because I was transitioning. So they could do whatever they want to me, and I was just in so much pain. I do have a bruise on this arm too, but that's kind of going away. But the bruises were from where the IV blew, I guess. So my veins were moving around, so they couldn't get that in. They just pretty much threw that out the window. At this point, when they couldn't get the IV in, the blood work came, they took my blood. I'm like, I'm not getting an epidural, am I? They told me that I wouldn't be getting an epidural. It looked unlikely. I was just mentally preparing myself to give birth naturally. I didn't expect to this time, even though that's what I wanted for my first pregnancy, but I was anticipating being pain-free this time and just really enjoying the whole labor process, which did not happen. So I had two really wonderful nurses. They were such an amazing support. I did have my mom and my husband there, but they were kind of flustered because of how much pain I was in and how quickly everything was transpiring. So I kept holding onto the bed. I didn't have any breaks in between my contractions at this point. I was just holding onto the bed and I was moaning pretty loud. As it got a bit more intense, I was moaning a little bit more loudly, and then at the point where I was about to push for the first time, I screamed. So I started screaming. I was in so much pain. I didn't think I'd be one of those people who scream, but it was intense. So this happened over the course of the hour. I told them at that point I felt like I needed to push, and they're like, no, you can't be that fast already. So the girl checked me. I was 8 centimeters at that point. I had to go tend to Ariana because she was fussing and it needed to be fed. So now I'm back. I believe I was at the spot where I was 8 centimeters, and she went to check me. I think this is actually where I started to scream, because she went to check me and it was very uncomfortable because 8 centimeters transitioning. She said I still had a little bit of cervix, so I wasn't quite ready to push yet. Pulled out her hand. I told her baby was coming. The pressure, I feel it. Like my body, I couldn't do anything to control what was about to happen next. I wasn't trying to push at all. Up until this point, I wasn't pushing at all. Nothing. It was just something was going to happen. I warned her. I warned my nurse. My other nurse was in the hall trying to call my OB because things were progressing quite fast, faster than anyone anticipated. She told my nurse it would be about 15 minutes that he'd be out of the surgery, be able to come here and deliver. And I said, nope, not happening. As soon as I told them that, baby pretty much shot out to crown. This is where it gets really, really crazy. So as soon as Ariana shot to crown, she kind of got stuck right there. And my nurse, who was right beside me, the other nurse in the hall, they're trying to get a doctor at this point, anyone to come in to deliver Ariana. And she screamed, gloves. So the other nurse came in, had her gloves ready. People in the hall ended up grabbing a family physician who worked at the hospital to come in. He last delivered 10 years ago, but he was all smiles. I remember him coming in. He was so happy. He was so happy to be delivering. So he was just like, I'm in intense, crazy pain, and this guy is just smiling away, and I'm just like, what is going on? The other nurse came to me. She just said, don't scream. You're wasting your energy. As soon as she told me that, I stopped instantly. She looked me in the eyes. She's like, focus on your breathing. So as soon as I did that, I was just listening to her. She was such a big help. So was my other nurse as well. She was like really calm. This one was just like, to the point, you need to do this. And I loved both kind of takes on how to help me deliver. I needed both of them. So it was really amazing. My mom and my husband looked at each other at that point. They had like tears in their eyes. They're like, this is happening. They didn't realize how fast it was going. I don't think anyone really believed me when I was like, this is happening. So we were ready to push at this point. The one nurse who told me to focus on my breathing, I had one contraction. I pushed, I think, 3 times, if that, and Ariana was there. So it was super, super quick. Transition was absolutely the worst. And for anyone out there, pushing wasn't even that bad. So in my mind, when I felt the pain that I was in transition, I'm like, I can't do this. I can't push out this baby. And I remember they were putting my legs ready to deliver. I wasn't attached to anything. They told me to hold my one leg. The other nurse held the other, and just to bear down and push. So breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. And they just told me to bear down, push. I had 3 pushes, as I said. She was out. And pushing was so relieving. It was nothing compared to transition. That is definitely the worst part. Don't be afraid to push. Don't be afraid of delivering, because that isn't the hardest part. You will reach your hardest part in transition, I believe. And surprisingly enough, I didn't tear this time. And with Alex, I tore really bad. I think it was bordering on a 3rd-degree tear. They called it a 2nd, but bordering on a 3rd. And my recovery was much, much harder than it was this time. So I didn't even tear for how fast it came. And Alex was really controlled, but I tore for him. Basically, my doctor told me I had the perfect labor. Not to me, but in like textbook cases, pretty much like the perfect labor, because it was fast. I didn't tear. I was up and walking right away. I went to take a shower, but first, after Ariana came out, I remember the nurse telling the doctor, we don't cut the cord while it's pulsating. She was kind of guiding him through the whole delivery process, which was a little bit crazy to me because he hadn't had delivered in so long. They placed her on my chest. I did skin to skin right away. And then after that, I nursed her. She nursed for an hour. She latched on right away, and she was nursing the whole time. She's been really good at breastfeeding. Haven't had an issue. Alex latched on right away too. Super happy about that. So breastfeeding's been going really well. We were so happy. They told me it was a girl, but at the time when I was pushing, had my eyes closed. I couldn't see anything. With Alex, I was able to look at a mirror and watch, and that's what I wanted this time, was to be able to watch, but there was no way that was happening, because my eyes were closed and I was pushing that baby out. It was just crazy how fast everything happened. Everyone was joking about how next time, if I was to have another baby, that Charles would be delivering. So any sign of labor, if I were to have another baby, to come in right away because of how fast it happened this time. I'm really happy that I did get to experience 2 different kinds of labors. If I had to choose which labor I would do, if I would do a long labor with an epidural, back labor, or a quick labor, really intense pain, but short, no epidural, I would go with my second labor. With as much pain as I felt and how quickly and scary it was the second time around, I would definitely take a natural quick labor over a laborious, long 11-hour one like I had the last time with an epidural and back labor. It was much easier for me this time in ways, much harder in a lot of ways as well. I was in shock that I had a girl. Like, I thought the whole time I was going to, but I wasn't as sure. But I was in shock. I think I was in shock with how fast everything went, that I had a natural birth, that I had a little girl. It was just all so much to take in, and I was just extremely happy. I didn't cry this time. I know there was tears in my husband's eyes and my mom's. I didn't have time to. I was just so caught off guard with everything that happened, and just so in love with having a little girl and just having her there. So it was just such a beautiful experience. Everything happened so perfectly. I wouldn't change a thing about it. It was literally my perfect labor, and I'm really glad I didn't end up having an epidural, because by the time it would have came, it would have probably kicked in after I would have already had her, which would have been irrelevant. If I would have known I was in the transition phase at the time, I wouldn't have asked for an epidural. However, I didn't know how far along I was, because they hadn't checked me from being in the wheelchair to my bed until I was 8 centimeters. So it was really, really fast. No one had a clue, except for me. In my mind, I'm like, she's coming. She's coming now. So it was a crazy experience, so much different than the first. You can't really plan. I did have some questions why I didn't have a doula. I had a question about that last time. I didn't feel I need one. I was really comfortable with my OB. He ended up showing up after, and he was joking about how he said it was going to be fast, but not that fast. So it's a little bit sad that he didn't get to deliver either of my children, but you know what? At least someone was there. Because I was pretty sure the nurse was going to have to deliver, so was my mom and Charles, which I wouldn't have any problem with, but that baby was coming. So she made a pretty dramatic entrance into the world at 10:13 a.m. She weighed 8 pounds, and she was 21¼ inches long. So if you have any other questions, leave them down below. I'm probably forgetting something. It was such a quick labor and delivery, as I said, so I'm probably missing things, but it was seriously a blur to me. I was just in this pain situation, and obviously you would know if you've ever given birth, but it was just crazy, crazy, absolutely amazing, beautiful experience, but super, super intense and scary. But yeah, with that being said, I want to show you and introduce you to Ariana. She already interrupted me a couple times during filming this to be fed, so I'm going to bring her here to show you. She's probably sleeping right now, but I am going to introduce you to her. So here is Ariana. She's just sleeping right now, kind of waking her up. She's really warm. She is 2 weeks as of today, is Monday. It's also her daddy's birthday today. Something really cute. I asked Charles what he wanted for his birthday, which is today, and he said, "You've already given me everything I've ever wanted." So that pretty much melted my heart. My hormones after my pregnancy, crazy. So that pretty much just like broke me down. I'm just like, that is like the sweetest thing I ever heard. So this is my little girl. I think she favors her daddy. She looks a lot like him. She looked pretty much exactly like Alex when she was born. And as soon as they handed her to me, I'm like, Alex? She looks so much like him. There's a little bit of me in her, but I do see a lot of her dad right now. So, are you getting hungry? She has a very strong neck. I don't want to get lipstick on you. I am going to go and feed her again, but that's her. I hope you guys enjoyed my story. I'm probably missing some things because it was so quick, even though this is going to be a long video in general. But things are going really, really well with us. Charles is home to look after Alex. I'd say things are easier the second time around because you kind of know what you're doing. I know I got a lot of questions about that, but I think it is easier. But yeah, I gotta go.